Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. Several months after the fall of Bashar Al-Assad, Syria remains battered by more than a decade of war and is now facing the uphill task of rebuilding from within and claiming legitimacy on the global stage. On this episode, we speak with London-based Syrian analyst Ghassan Ibrahim. Is the worst truly behind Syria, or could renewed sectarian violence and growing tensions with Israel and Turkey cause further chaos? Will the new government win over Arab and Western leaders and finally see the crippling sanctions lifted? And ultimately, can President Al-Sharaa deliver the peace and unity Syrians so desperately need? Mr. Ibrahim, thank you for joining us on Frankly Speaking. Now, exactly 4 months after the fall of the Bashar Assad regime, there is a new transitional government in place in Syria. Frankly speaking, how optimistic are you about the country's future?
Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm optimistic, but cautiously optimistic. The situation in Syria is not that easy. There is no Assad when he left literally made sure that all the institutions in Syria is not functioning. He stayed in power until to the last day, and after that, when he left, literally he left the country on its knees. So the new government is facing a lot of challenges. There is internal challenges, regional challenges, and as well international one. The government itself, it's new, does not have capabilities in terms of financial capabilities. They don't have resources. Everything is like in hold. We have a lot of natural resources in the country, but due to the war, long-lasting war, and as well the misuse of the resources, everything is not functioning. We have oil, gas, different type of minerals, and different type of as well natural resources. Everything is now working at probably 5% of its maximum capabilities. So they are facing challenges to fund their work because all these ministries now they are trying to rebuild it from the scratch. Another issue as well, the human resources. Many of the Syrians in the last 14 years left the country, let alone even before the main crisis and the revolution. Many of the Syrian talented one of them left the country, and in somehow now they face big consequences because they can't re-attract these talented one due to there is no any like a proper environment to tell to the people who working abroad, leave your work and come back to a country where there is no at all any like basic need. The basic need is not, it can't be like we usually we take it for granted here around the world. No electricity, no energy supplies. So literally there is no any good environment to tell to the people come back, especially the talented one, especially the investors, and as well people who can participate in the new reform. So the current government, there is big hope, but the question is where they will bring all these resources to make them function as any other government around the world.
And I think you make a really important there. I think there's big concerns about the talent drain, about needing to have that stability at home in order to bring, so many of the Syrian expatriates home. But we are not seeing that peace and stability just yet. Of course, we're seeing around 90% of people living in poverty. There's concerns about sectarian violence as well, regional issues. But we'll go into that in just a moment. Something I've noticed about you, Mr. Ibrahim, is people who regularly see you participate in television discussions, who read your opinion pieces or see your social media posts, they would certainly note that you write a lot about Syria, really without any favour, without any fear as well. Tell me, do your quite forthright opinions count for something in a post-Assad Damascus?
I do always keep my eye on what's happening there. At the same time as well, I look at the international appetite of doing something with Syria, or at least consider supporting this government. It looks like there is if we look at the international scene in full picture, there is like attention, or there is an intention from as well the European to not to let Syria be alone. This is from the Western side, at least, and as well regionally, all the Arab countries are trying to help the Syrian to overcome all these crises. But still, the main issue is internally. It will come gradually. The more the government do more, the more it will attract attention from outside and feel makes other countries willing to support them. Obviously, a couple of hiccup here and there. It's could happen, and we've seen something in coastal area of Syria when there is some kind of clashes, some civilian in sectarian way murdered. So there is some hiccups, but if we look at the full picture, it's something promising, but require a lot of work, require a lot of restructuring the new government. Even the current government require as well, different companies and different branches and different, bodies working with the government need as well restructuring. So there is long way of work required by this government. But when I try to look, I try to look at the half full of it. I always see that there is a potential. There is a way we can, at the same time, when we criticize what they are doing, at the same time, we try to say, we look at the part where they achieve something and that's promising. No one was thinking that Syria will end up without, after Assad leave, without a huge sectarian war. So far, it's a minimal, and it's not threatening the national security. Still, there is discussion between different background of Syrians, different religion, different sects, different ethnicity. So there is intention from everybody to take responsibility and open the dialogue. Same when I look at it as a part of the Syrian. Try to see when I try to look at all the Syrian in equal way. I see where their concerns. I try to represent it. At the same time, I try to assure others that there is something happening, and this is promising.
Sure, it does feel still that Syria is divided, and I want to ask you about some of the sectarian violence about the Alawites in just a moment. But first, I want to pick up on what you said about having the support for Syria at the moment. I think support from regional Arab leaders as well as Western allies, I think, is needed more than ever. And I want to talk a little bit about the charm offensive underway from President Al-Sharaa at the moment. You've praised his upcoming visit to the UAE. Of course, this follows his recent trip to Saudi Arabia in February. That was his first foreign visit that took place just a couple of months ago. Tell me, what should we make of the specific destinations that he's chosen for his initial foreign visits?
Yeah, this is a very good indication. Many people look at Shara and its government, they say it's a total Islamist, but it looks like they are pragmatic, which is promising as well. They chose carefully the moderate country alliance, uh, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and as well Egypt. So he trying to relocate Syria within a new alliance of modernity, stability, and open-minded policies. So it give a good intention, give a lot of assurance to the Syrians when they've seen that the Syrian president head to Saudi Arabia, praise Saudi example, trying to learn from the Saudi development plans and Vision 2030. So he's trying to send messages to the Syrians, send messages to the regional powers, and as well, he's now the planned visit to UAE. It will give a lot of hope for the Syrian, and as well, it will send good messages to the key players in the region to say Syria is not going to be threat to the stability of the regional stability. Syria will be productive and active and be part of this kind of alliance between the regional powers. And the visit to UAE is essential, it's very important. It will, Syria need now to friends and brothers to help them, to guide them. Everyone knows that UAE able through its wide network internationally to open the door to reintroduce the new Syria to the world, and as well Syria need as well to learn from the Emirati style on running countries in successful way. So obviously it will be very effective as well. We have a sanction on Syria. I think Syrian president, hoping that the Saudi, the UAE, and as well different Arab countries could help in facilitating conversation or discussion with the West to lift such sanctions.
And I want to ask you about sanctions in just a moment. But firstly, again, we've talked about the importance of the visit to the UAE as well as Saudi Arabia as well. But it's also important to remember that he will also be visiting Turkey. He wants to be able to build that relationship into what he's called a strategic partnership across all levels. Tell me, I have to wonder, do you think that President, should he be really focusing on his rather ideological heart when it comes to Turkey, or do you think he needs to be taking the more pragmatic approach to Turkey?
He in the end of the day, he looks at Turkey as a typical friend. So he does not need to do the hard work to convince the Turkish to be supportive to the new government. It's naturally allied together with from the beginning to the end. So it's for him is he trying to create the balance. It looks clear that whenever he go to the Arab countries, he keeps a discussion with the Turks to give as well assurance to Turkey that this kind of conversation with the Arab countries is essential. Syria, at the end of the day, is an active member of the Arab League and has to learn from and get the support from the Arab. At the same time, he's trying to send messages to Turkey that we need your help, but with a limit. Because in the end of the day, we noticed the involvement of Turkey caused to trouble and somehow with the Kurdish internally and with Israel. We noticed recently that Israel is escalated in south of Syria, concerned that the new government will follow the style of Turkey and become more like anti-Israel, pro some kind of Islamist militia here and there, and make Syria a hub for such a militia. So for that reason, I think it's as much as Turkey can play a good role in Syria, as much as well put a pressure on the new government rather than offer the full support for them.
And of course, there are a lot of concerns about these tensions with Israel threatening to spill over, particularly in southern Syria at the moment. But I want to pick up on something you said earlier about sanctions. Of course, the sanctions that were put in place under the Al-Assad regime are still affecting Syria today under the new transitional government. Now, President Al-Sharaa and his ministers have been appealing for the removal of these US sanctions on Syria. Now, The Economist recently ran a story titled "Lift Sanctions to give Syria a chance of rebuilding." Mr. Ibrahim, where do you stand on sanctions?
Absolutely, the sanction is at this moment is out of context, because if we look at the sanction when the West had to go the route of the sanctions because they were not able to do much in Syria, and they wanted to send a clear message to the previous regime that he's not welcome in the international arena. He is not going to be having a hope of restructuring itself because will be drained from the resources. So the sanction at that time was legitimate to some extent because as well in the end of the day, any sanction leave impact on the normal citizen and civilian organization and even to normal any Syrian citizen who everyone noticed the struggle. But now, as no more there is a reason for such sanctions, Assad is gone. So the sanction now is literally just hurting ordinary Syrian people. So for that reason, the American, the European, they have to rethink that keeping these sanctions is not just as well hurting the Syrians, but stopping the new government from delivering its promises. If the West want to see Syria a normal state running in normal behavior without showing any kind of enemy approach, they have to help. And the way to help is literally left the sanction, let the lot of wealthy Syrian abroad to come back and participate in rebuilding, open the door for the international and regional powers to look at the opportunities available in Syria. Due to this sanction, at this moment, there is not much can be done. Even the government, even if they get some hope or support or promises, let's say, from some countries or some individuals or organizations that they want to participate in the rebuild Syria, they will, in the end of the day, they're all waiting to see the sanction left. So everything, it will stay as we can say, let's say, as a promises, but these promises with time, if there is no clear passage towards Syria, this hope will diminish gradually and will become just the words, and the hope of rebuilding Syria will take longer, and the Syrian government will deliver less and less, and it will become an obstacle. It may create internal, actually, a crisis when the Syrian people who raise the bar now, hoping that they will receive some better services, better electricity and internet and so on. If they don't see it soon, they may go to the street and we end up with another crisis in Syria.
And we do know that the US sanctions are affecting the economy. More than 90% of Syrians are living in poverty, and it feels like the hands are tied of the new government in terms of trying to rebuild. Now, the transitional president has spoken a lot about creating a new chapter in Syria, but there's no doubt that the wave of sectarian killings targeting Alawites in early March in the western coastal areas of Syria, that was seen as a major setback to President Al-Sharaa's main goal of turning this new chapter. Tell me, do you feel like the worst is now over, or is the worst still to come?
It's difficult to say that it's all now done and sorted because, the main issue with the current government, not with Shara and its surrounding or inner circle around him and his government, but the issue is where if we say ring one, ring two, ring three is set in the ring three, where I mean some far extremist Islamists who are there were difficult to get rid of them because they may turn against the government, and keeping them in the country is as well difficult. I think the strategy Mr. Shara is following is gradually moving them away from the centers of the big cities to the suburb of the away from where there is a dense population, and gradually try to dismantle them without letting them feel that they are targeted. So it's until this process fully complete, we may see some clashes, some sectarian movement. In the end of the day, these 14 years, let's put it clearly, it was sectarian war. when Iran and different militia from Iraq, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Afghanistan, different country came and mobilized by Iran. So they had, sectarian intentions.
Have you
On the other
seen
hand, there was as well.
incontrovertible evidence that the Alawite factions loyal to the deposed Assad regime took part in the killings of the government's security forces in the Latakia province, which supposedly touched off the sectarian bloodletting? I have to wonder, can the Al-Sharaa government win the trust of the traumatized Alawites still?
Yeah, it's literally started that some ex-army, belong to the regime. They started trying to get rid of the new, this new army or new security forces there, and targeted them. There is a lot of evidence. We've seen some videos. It's been verified. But because if we go back to the first scene when we've seen Assad regime collapsing, we notice that the new army was letting all these ex-Assadists or people who supported Assad to just leave the city and go back to their villages, their towns, their cities without any fight. There was intention that all Syrians want to close that chapter. They don't want to go back to that moment of sectarian war, because sectarian war, if it's continue, will never end. So the only way is to forgive and try to forget. So this is a policy was adopted by Mr. Sharaa, but looks like due to this kind of revenge in coastal area, pushed him to send some troops. And these troops from Damascus, from different cities, went there. Some of them not well organized. Some of them may have some sectarian agenda. Some of them maybe they witnessed some sectarian agenda against them during Assad regime. So some of them acted in a primitive way of revenging rather than letting the justice go its process. So we've seen. I'm not trying to give excuse. It was awful. It was unjustified. It was some kind of a war crime. It was not acceptable. In the end of the day, all Syrians, whether the people in coastal Syria or different parts of Syria, they are all Syrian, and has to put an end for such action anymore, not to happen anymore.
And I think that is the concern. When we continue to see these deep divides, it feels like it's hard to find a way forward. And obviously, when we look at the structure of the new government, despite the inclusion of some ministers from different backgrounds in the new Syrian cabinet, ethnic and religious groups have said that they weren't consulted during the appointment process. Do you feel that the government's intentions here were sincere?
I think there is a very fine line between the two arguments. I think Mr. Sharaa want to include more different background in his government, but at the same time he's a cautious that if any internal crisis happen, he does not want to see any minister to defect. So he's trying to choose loyals from different backgrounds as much as possible. Probably this is not the ideal transition government. It's probably edition one, and we may see restructuring this government as we go with time. I think maybe with time he may have more minorities, more different backgrounds included with the government, but he's trying to create the balance between to have majorities, minorities, different background involved in this government. At the same time, he wants kind of like unity in his government. So if there is any crisis, not anyone to say, "Oh, I'm not liking that, I'm gonna defect." He does not want to lose the power, and he wants to keep concrete power in his hand.
Tell me then, what do you make of some of the Syrian Druze movement who are calling to join Israel? They see Israel as their protector. And do you agree with the analysis that this was very much a calculated move by Israel to further divide Syria?
I think, there is two aim for Israel in this action. There is tactical aim is to put pressure on the current government and to say we are gonna work on dividing Syria, partitioning the country, to create a buffer zone around Israel, uh, either some Arab and Druze and different background to be on the border. But this is when we look at the strategic thinkers of Israel, they do say that this is not going to create a peace and stability for Israel. So in the long term, they aim to see a stronger central government that can talk to every part of Syria, and they wish the Israeli one day to strike a deal with a strong Syrian government in Damascus to create stabilities on the border rather than relying on minorities or relying on just on the border
Well, you
itself.
say Israel wants to
So
create stability, but then on the flip side, we see that long after the fall of the Assad regime, Israel continues to repeatedly strike parts of Syria, areas that it claims are storing weapons and military sites, military airports as well. Do you feel that these one-sided attacks just end up making the Al-Sharaa government look weak and helpless?
it may look like that, but we know that in the end of the day, this kind of attack, it was mainly on some sort of a military depot that may put pressure on Israel. They don't want to see some rockets flying over from Syria toward them. And at the same time, we noticed that Mr. Sharaa and his government and other Syrian people, there is no action. And the reason why no action, because they don't want to escalate it. They are trying to well calculate the risk. They don't want to behave like a militia. They want to be a state. They don't want to follow Hezbollah or Hamas. We've seen any action toward Israel, it will bombard 10 times. We'd rather leave some. There is some, I think, second track diplomacy open now between Syria and Israel, and there is some kind of messages being sent here and there, and to establish kind of like de-escalation and go back to the de-escalation mode, probably with some few years open dialogue about normalization. I think it's needed some kind of to send some assurance as well to the Israeli, because if the Syrians themselves feeling a bit cautious of Mr. Sharaa government. So what about the Israeli? What about other countries? So yeah, it's in somehow, I don't want to say it's a legitimate fear, but there is a fear. So if Mr. Sharaa sends some assurances to different countries surrounding, mainly Israel, because the main threat now is Israel. Israeli, in the end of the day, they will understand it's not in their advantage to partition the country, because if you have a small, let's say, Druze government in the border, they have no any access, no sea, no airport, border with Syria and Jordan and Israel. So it does not survive. It won't offer stability for Israel. Israel, in the end of the day, the policy is to deal with the strong enemy better than to deal with a weak.
But let me bring in some other countries as well. You're confident we will see stability between Israel and Syria. Right now, we're not seeing that. But let me bring in, your thoughts on the growing relationship between Syria and Moscow. Obviously, previously under the Assad regime, they were very closely knit. Do you think that there is, any potential for the new Syrian government to develop their relationship with Russia? Could we see Moscow regain its strategic and economic influence in Syria if the US continues to shun the new government in Syria and continues to keep those Caesar-like sanctions still in place?
I think, it's a good action from Damascus to strengthen the relation with Moscow. The Russians shown that in the last years that they are pragmatic, despite they were supportive to Assad at that time, but they left their door open to the oppositions, even open to negotiate with Mr. Sharaa when he was Julani. So the Russians are very pragmatic, and they sent some good messages to Damascus. And it's the same thing. They heard good good, promises from Damascus that the relationship won't be weakened. Yes, Syria is trying to outreach to the West because they want to rebuild the country, but this is not on the cost of the own Russia. They want to keep the relation with Russia in a stable way, in a promising way. Probably Russia may play a very vital role in like striking a deal with Israel because the Russians have good relation with the Israeli. Now they are creating good contact with Damascus government, and as well same time we notice that the American will be striking a deal with the Russian in Ukraine. So probably we will notice with the time that the Russian and the American and the West go back to a normal situation. So having good relation with all, it will be benefiting Syria. And I think this is what the Syrian government is trying to achieve. And the Russian shown so far, let's say when happens a coastal crisis in Syria, when some massacres and some fighting there, the Russians stayed aside. They did not say, we are supportive to the ex-Assad militia or supporting the new government. So this is good messages as well.
And there's still concerns about the role of Iran. Tell me, how do you view the threat of destabilization of Syria by parts of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps? There's ongoing concerns that really they're taking advantage of the sectarian distrust we're seeing in Syria, the marginalization of the Alawites and the Druze, the grinding poverty we've already spoken a lot about, the widespread hunger and the high unemployment there.
Obviously, Iran suffered a big loss in the war in Syria. They invested the most in this war, and they lost the biggest loss in this war. So they wouldn't leave Syria to be a stable state without working on destabilizing. We see double messages. We see the diplomats speak nice words from the Iranian, but we hear from some hardliners, revolutionary guard, and supreme leader, some conflicted messages. They send messages that they want to revenge. Obviously, what happened in Latakia and Tartus in the coastal part of Syria, Iran has some part to play with that. They played role with that. They funded some militia. They tried to push toward partition Syria and create Alawite, Druze, and Kurdish, and try to partition Syria literally as what Israel was trying in its border. But it looks like the Iranian failed again, and now they're trying to use the Turkish door, by knocking the Turkish door, and tell to the Turkish to broker a deal with Syria to go back as just have a normal embassy, normal consulate, and normal relation. I don't think the Syrian will welcome them. They did not leave any good heritage behind them in Syria to let the Syrian feel that they are welcome. Until Iran behave like a normal state. When they stop exporting their revolution, then the Syrian may consider normalization with Iran. But as long as there is Iran involved in different parts of the world, the Syrian will be concerned to have a normal relation with Iran.
And we are seeing a very much weakened Iran these days, but there's still big question marks about their ongoing ability to still destabilize regional security. And particularly when we look at southern Syria, there's big concerns. We've seen Israeli Prime Minister Mr. Netanyahu. Now, he's demanded that Syria demilitarize the south. Meanwhile, his defense minister has said that Israeli troops will remain in Syria indefinitely. So, Mr. Ibrahim, in your opinion, how high should the restoration of Syrian sovereignty over Israeli-occupied areas, how high should that be on President Al-Sharaa's list of priorities?
If we look at if we we focus on the thinkers, the Israeli thinkers, all of them, they say all these kind of advancing in south of Syria is going to be part of the deal will be put on the table. They want to try to tell to the Syrian, do not talk about Golan Heights and different parts of the ex-occupied areas, but focus on the let's talk with the New Deal that withdraw from these parts and we reach de-escalation. So they want to show that they offer the Syrians something by one day when there will be discussion, they will withdraw from these lands because it's not strategic for them. For them is for Israel the security for the always the message or what they usually say that Israel security lie with the heights, with the mountains and part of Golan is occupied Golan. So they want to keep that part of Syria occupied by them, but the rest it's literally is not any strategic essence of it. So they will give it back. They won't try to stay there. They don't have a full supported. There is a hostile environment there. Not all the Druze want to be part of Israel. At least I'm talking about in Suwaida and different part of Syria. We may hear sometimes some messages that they want Israel to protect them, but there is a lot of messages as well from head of the Druze communities saying we are not going toward of joining Israel. We are just want the new government to represent us and reach discussion with Syrian government. They are not relying on the Israeli. So Israel does not have a good environment to stay there, and there is no any advantage, no strategic advantage. So once will be discussion, these areas will be on the table as well for to talk about between the Syrian and Israel. Which looks like it's already started the discussion. There is an unannounced discussion through third party and sometimes directly.
Mr. Ibrahim, you said earlier you felt confident about Syria's future and creating that peace and stability, but we've also seen reports from Turkey that they're currently negotiating a joint defence pact with Shara's government. They're looking to station aircraft and air defence system at Syria's T4 and Aleppo air bases. Are you concerned? Do you worry that Syria could once again turn into a regional battleground with Turkey replacing Iran as Israel's sparring partner?
There is a big risk, but what's the situation here? If we look at, the messages Turkey heard from Damascus recently, which is, direct messages not being announced, they trying to tell to the Turkey, we don't want you to have a big base that will trigger the Israeli. You won't be able to protect us from Israel, and you won't be able to protect yourself there. So we'd rather there is a problem between Turkish government and the Israeli, and the Syrian telling them go on direct discussion and sort out your problem before we strike any military deal. And it looks like last couple of days, this week, there was some discussion. Turkish-Israeli discussion, some, even direct discussion. Some of it is taking place in Turkey as well. So the Syrians, they don't want to let their country be, a box, like a mailbox. Both sides send messages through the Syrian land. So there is a concern, and the Syrian as well trying probably ask the Arab to help them to put some sort of pressure on Turkey. Do not understand that, yes, if the regime change in Syria does not mean Syria has to be under the control of Turkey. So, and the Syrian government sent some messages. Even the last meeting between Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Sharaa, there was some, both sides, there was not a sweet discussion. There was disagreement. Mr. Sharaa want to see stability in Syria. He want to strike a deal with Kurdish community in Syria. He does not want to enter in a proxy war on behalf of Turkey to fight with the Syrian Democratic Forces, which mainly Kurdish community run by Kurdish. And he want to tell to the Kurds, let's calm the situation down. And he is now brokering a deal between the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurdish, and Turkey. And we may hear, in the coming months, some kind of like de-escalation agreement brokered by the Syrian and sponsored by the American. It will create some kind of peace between the Kurds and the Turkish.
And certainly
I'm talking between the Syrian
very
Kurds
much
and
needed.
Turkey government.
Mr. Ibrahim, we are almost out of time, but before we go, I want to get your thoughts on a recent Wall Street Journal report. Now, a former governor of the Al-Qanitra province has been quoted as saying, if Israel continues its occupation and keeps bullying and harassing people, all the extremists of the world will come over here to wage jihad. Do you think that this warning could actually prove to be prophetic?
It's probably the message was taken out of its contents because I think it was not a smart way to say such thing. Probably he was saying it to the locals, and someone picked it and went international. Obviously, there is a clear message from Damascus to around the world. Syria will not be, a hub to attack any country, including Israel. And he said it. And Mr. Sharaa, he did not call Israel as enemy. He called it the Israeli state, which is not usually heard in Syria. During Assad regime, when he was part of what's so-called resistant movement or alliance, they used to call Israel without mentioning a state. They did not recognize Israel as a state. This is a good message to the Israelis. The Israelis, they have to read the messages carefully. And as well, some Western media, unfortunately, who try to just to choose some controversial messages, speak here and there. We have to look at the mainstream rather than at some local messages misused.
So you don't see Syria turning into that regional battleground?
Not at all. No. Syria will be, hopefully, all the Syrian looking at Syria as a hub for stability and development, free trade, Syria open for normalization with every normal country or normal state around the world, including Israel. The Syrian look at normalization with Israel as an advantage for Syria and advantage for everyone. They don't want to play a war of others. Our war is development, making Syria a stable country, making Syria attractive country, attract more tourists, and make the country is literally as it used to be before Ba'ath Party came in power.
Well, hopefully we do see that for the sake of all the Syrian people there. Mr. Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm afraid we're out of time, but really appreciate your insights. And I think the world's eyes will be glued on the big meeting taking place between the UAE and Syria in the coming days.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Thank you.